Hi, I'm Jack Berry, and I'm up here at the beautiful Grand Traverse Resort and Spa in Acme, Michigan. That's right near Traverse City. And with Greg Johnson, who is doing a super job of covering every golf tournament in Michigan, since the newspapers don't seem to want to do that anymore. And to Ken Devine, who's the former executive director of the Michigan section of the PGA of America. And we're going to talk a little bit about the Bear and the Michigan Open. It came here in 1981. Actually, it started over more towards the highway over there with the resort course. And Fred Muller, who's the pro down at Crystal Downs, a somewhat famous course in Michigan. And Fred overcame some nasty weather to win that first Michigan Open here, and the Open stayed over at the resort course for about 4 years, and then it moved. Tell us about it, Greg.
Yeah, it was my first one was actually the third one here, which was still at Spruce. Well, it was what's called Spruce Run now, which was just the resort course back then and was a wonderful golf course all on its own. But I came because I was working in the Grand Rapids at the Grand Rapids Press, and Buddy Witten was kind of the star of the show then. He was probably the best player in the section at the time. And so I came up to cover Buddy Witten, and that was my first introduction to Buddy Witten. And later in the year, they sent me out to Riviera because he was leading the PGA National Championship. So it was a jump into golf. You're the guy on the golf beat because I'd been a former caddy, and I was the only one who knew anything about golf on the staff. So that was kind of my introduction to this place. And then when they built the Bear, came for the grand opening and all that, and kept coming. I haven't quit coming, and it was 28 years here, and then then we went and had 9 other Michigan Opens in between, and we're back after 10 years, and it still seems like home. It just seems like this is where the Michigan Open should always be to me.
Families would agree with that. Ken, how about your experience here at the Bear and the Grand Traverse Resort?
My first one was 1991. Came up here knowing nothing about the section golf. I had lived here, born and raised here. Chet J, where you and I came back here in 1991, and they told me go up. We got this great tournament at the Bear, so I came up here, and I looked around, and I looked for Nicholas and Palmer. When are these guys going to get here? And then I realized my club professors are going to be up here. I said, hell, I got some job security as long as we can keep this thing. And it was just a great time for me. Funny story, Ken Horniak was the golf professional here. And I think I told this story to you the other day. And he came up to my room with a packet of things, and he talked to me about a number of things, which was great, to get me indoctrinated on and he handed me a sheet with a bunch of circles on it. I had no idea what in the world they were. I said, what am I supposed to do with this? He says, you got to set the hole locations. I said, I've never been on the golf course. I set pins up there. I was going like this, agreed, and I didn't get one complaint from a whole week on my hole locations. So that was my initial one. I got a little smarter as we went on.
Well, you started out. You were a salesman. And you right. I remember your dad at Rackham, and then your brother, a terrific player, and you were always top dressed salesman. He was called the Duke.
He did. He had those great suit jackets.
Right. Yeah. He was Mr. Color. Yeah, very much so.
Every time he was a starter, he would be the shining star. He was the shining star. The other players didn't matter.
Well, we have some of the top players in the state have always played their top games, I think, at the Bear. Randy Erskine, many-time champion. Buddy Witten, who's won the national PGA championship. We've had Brent Veenstra set the course record, and I don't know of another section that has produced so many good PGA professionals who have been shining stars on the national scene.
Well, when I would go to national PGA meetings, not the first couple of years, but you know me, I'm not what is it, shrieking violet. I would I'd let the boys know how good it was here in Michigan. So they started to follow it, and they started looking at our purses and all of this, and then all of the guys that won this that did go out on the tour. Jack, you know better than I. There was 5 or 6 of them played the tour, qualified for a number of events, and it was great competition. And you said play your best game. You better play your best game out here. You better play it. It's a tough golf course, but it's very fair. Once they started, remember the rough, how long it was when we first started coming up here?
Well, when it started, wow.
Off that first hole, you couldn't see the water.
Yeah, and 10 and 11, that was like a tall field out there.
I remember the first guy I walked with was, I'll come up with you, at 83, Jack. The names don't pop in too quickly. But anyway, I followed him. It was the first time I walked the golf course with a player. He's from the west side of the state, and he dunked his second shot on one. I said to myself, what's so tough about this place? You guys making 2 off the bat. Great when they shot the 62. Remember the 62 Veenstra? He got a license plate, Wiener 62. Have you seen it? Yeah, he didn't want anybody to forget it, Greg. Remember the interview with him?
Oh, I remember that. Yeah. I had to do shot by shot. He was from Grand Rapids, so I had to do a graphic that had every shot in there.
Oh, there was great times, and the guys that went on to play, Buddy, what club professional champion of the year. You got the best golf professional. There's 27,000 of them, Jack, and he's never won. That's pretty good. And we had another one too. Who was it?
John Traub.
John Traub, yeah.
And Scott Hebert.
And Scott Hebert.
Jeff Roth. And
Jeff Roth, yeah. So we had some players come out of here.
Well, back in those early days, Randy Erskine and Buddy Witten they were top players, and they seemed to be trading championships back. Randy was from Battle Creek, went to the University of Michigan, and then happened to find a nice blonde friend in Detroit, married her, and played all around the state, winning championships. And Buddy Witten was over on your side of the state in Grand Rapids.
Yeah, Buddy had come home from Vietnam with a nail in his foot that he had. It was really a needle from a war injury kind of thing, and he was a medic in Vietnam, so he was haunted by that a little bit too. But he got a real job because the tour thing just wasn't for his lifestyle. He realized half the time he couldn't make it through 4 rounds walking on the foot. So he decided, I'm going to go, be a golf professional and ride a cart sometimes. So he did that, and he was still a wonderful player. That was Buddy Witten. Yep. But they became really big rivals in the state. They would trade championships, and they pushed each other because they were friends, but they would needle each other about who was doing better, and they would all play in the National Club Pro stuff, and they were pretty good rivals and that had gone back to like college days because Buddy had played in Mississippi, and he'd grown up with Hubert Green and those guys, and so he had come out of the South as this Southern star and junior All-American and all that stuff, and so they were they were pretty good rivals, and it made for some great head-to-head battles and great final pairings. No, I think I always think of him if you had to do a poster of the perfect golf professional, you could probably put Randy's picture on there. Because you walk in the shop and he always made you feel great. He'd go, you got a group. Let's make sure we get you a 4th. Let's make sure you have a good day. He wanted to make sure you had a great golf experience every time you showed up. And part of that was just meeting a friendly guy with a great smile. I mean, he would just take care of you. He was. He just had that look. He had that golf pro look. It was like they popped him out of a computer model and said, hey, let's make a perfect pro. Here he is.
Okay, Randy was, I guess, a jokester is what you'd call him. He was pulling pranks on everybody constantly, and he'd laugh. He would think that was the funniest thing. I remember he was playing the last round here, and somebody was 1 shot behind him. And the guy hit his tee shot, got back to his bag, jumped in the cart, and his bag fell off. Now, here's Randy's playing this guy for the championship. He unbuckled his golf bag so it would fall, and the clubs came out, and Randy's laughing, and this guy's dead serious. he really, when I took the job, he came up to me and said, "We're going to do good." That's the first thing he said, and it wasn't me. It was perfect guy. He's a guy's guy. The women loved him, and he was a great player.
Well, we went from those years of Randy and Buddy, and a young guy from the Saginaw area popped up and started playing real championship golf, and Jeff Roth also around that time. And Steve Brady and Jeff Roth were almost like the same as Randy and Buddy. And Steve, of course, has moved on and played some out on trying on the tours, and then came back and it's a club pro, and now you couldn't have a better job. He's the professional at Oakland Hills Country Club.
Yeah, he's the big boss there, which, doesn't really surprise me, because he was a guy that he just kept working at it. I mean, he went to Q school 16 times or something like that, some huge number, and missed by a shot like 4 or 5 times. I mean, he was so close, and yet he'd gear back up. His wife would talk him into it, and they'd take that van and they'd go again. I mean, it was amazing. And he'd always show up at the Michigan Open, and he'd always play great. And of course, it's hard to beat Jeff Roth, because the guy was one of the best putters in the country. I don't care on any tour. He was a great putter, and so he's just playing hard to beat, because he'd get it on the green somehow, and then he was dangerous. So it was another great rivalry. It really was, and two completely different personalities, and make for interesting comments. You never knew which way the story was going to go, because they'd come into Preston, and you would learn something you didn't know before. So.
Yeah, and Jeff had a great career. He made the PGA's version of the Ryder Cup, of the American club pros versus the British, and Jeff was instrumental in an American victory, and I think John Traub was too in that Cup series of match.
Ray McGuire told me, Ray McGuire in town in Detroit was one of the best teachers and a good player. Remember, he led the Open one year, and shot 63 or some doggone thing to 95 or whatever. Ray told me that he thought John Traub had the best golf swing in the country.
He did. Yeah. He had a beautiful swing, beautiful, powerful swing.
Yes. Yeah. He really played. Brady was something else. Every time I'd give Brady a check, I'd say, "Steve, take this money, go on the tour, and I don't ever see you again," because all these club professionals he's beating their brains out. But the money that came out of this tournament for those guys launched them. I mean, you just look at this list you gave me here. They all went out and tried the tour. Gillis, look at him.
Well, he won the Open as a youngster, and then he came back with some experience of playing around the world and won it again. And he's still a great competitor now. And he says he made 2 mistakes. He had playoffs on the PGA Tour against Jordan Spieth and Rory McIlroy. And he says, "I've got a..."
Yeah, he launched their careers. Yeah, by losing to him. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. He launched their careers. He should have ended up caddying for him. He'd been a millionaire.
Tom is waiting 2 years to get on the Champions Tour. So
that's going to be fun.
But after those guys, we got somebody that came in here and he acted like he owned the place. Scott Hebert from Escanaba, and came over from across the bridge, came down here to Traverse City, and just about owned it.
Yeah, and he is. He's actually passed him now in majors, but and he's close to catching him in PGAs. I think he's one behind there, and he's tied with him for Michigan Open wins. So.
Have you ever seen Al Watkins give a lesson?
He's got 6. They both have 6 Michigan Open wins, and Al had 9 Michigan PGAs. All 15 of his majors were the 2, because they didn't have the other major choices. There wasn't a tournament of champions back then, so Al won what was available, and plus, Al won the big PGA and everything else. So it's kind of hard to compare anybody to Al Watrous, to be honest. Maybe Walter Hagen, we can go back there. But
came from both from the same course.
You're right. But in the modern era, Hebert's as close as we have. I mean, he's really dominated. He still can win the Michigan PGA at the drop of a hat, and he's still competitive here. He's just he's still a wonderful golfer, and he'll go to the National Club Pro next week, and he'll be one of the favorites. He'll be, there's a good chance he'll play in the National PGA again next year.
How about the guys we got going to the National Senior?
Well, Scott and Tom Workmeister and who we got another
Brian Carnes.
Brian, yeah. And Jim Dieters from Midland. I think he's on the list too.
Muskegon boy.
Yeah,
Always
yeah,
been a good player.
yeah.
Yep.
So it starts on the last day of the U.S. Open, oddly enough, which is Father's Day.
Okay.
And back when I was covering golf at the Free Press and the News, I missed more Father's Days than at the beginning. I got when the Open ended on Saturday with the 36 holes, which they finally got rid of. I'd be able to get home, but after that, but on Sundays, nope.
Now, Father's Day was a work day. It was in the middle of the golf schedule, so my family just wrote it off. He'll be gone. So, maybe we'll see him at Christmas if he's not at a bowl game. So, that's kind of how it was.
I remember when, stop me if I told this story already today, I tell it so often, is when Veenster shot the 62. I knew the heat that Jack was taking over this golf course. And on that, if Jack would have done everything Paul Nine wanted to be done, you'd never finish. You'd have been out here forever. And he said the other day, I kept telling him I want the toughest course in the world, toughest course in the world. Jack said, you don't want anybody to play it, though, do you? And, yeah. Anyway, when Veenster shot the 62, I called Jack, and I said, Jack, you won't believe what I'm going to tell you. We have a club professional from Washtenaw Country Club that you probably never heard of. He said, well, are you kidding me? I know Washtenaw. And I said he shot 62. He said, wow, maybe the SOBs will get off my back.
Well, that was, we talked to John Davis, who was the golf writer here, actually the sports writer at the Record Eagle back when the course was being built. And he came out here one day when Jack was fussing around one green. He didn't like the way the green set. And so he picked up pieces of sod and arranged them the way that he wanted them. And back in those days, John was the cameraman, was the photographer too. He was the writer, photographer, and he took a picture of Jack doing this. And the Record Eagle printed it, and the guy from his photo lab at the Record Eagle said, "Gee, that was pretty good of you to get Nicholas to do that." And he said Nicholas didn't realize what he was doing. And John said it showed that Jack really was, heart and soul into doing this golf course and making it just the way that he wanted. A lot of times guys will set out the way they want it done, and you don't see them for a while. But that was early in his designing career, and he obviously did a heck of a job.
Well, how about Paul Nine having the vision to do this and did it with everybody else's cash, but you got it done. And it's got to be one of the finest reasons. It's the best kept secret in the country. I know that. I know, Jack, you've promoted it all around the country, every place you've gone. So the Open here, boy, it was a feather in cap for the Michigan PGA to claim that this was our event.
It would be nice to see it stay here.
Oh, by all means, A lot of
the guys would like that too.
Well, all of the guys that missed the cut haven't. They're still packed. They're staying for the whole weekend, and they got the wife and the kids, and it's an outing. It's more than just a golf tournament.
It makes it a real event when it's up here, and it's an event venue. They build it with the stadium look around 18. That's kind of the way it was designed, and
a great media.
it's a great. It's just a kind of a good place for it. The golf course has had its share of criticism and all that, but and even when they marketed it at first, come play the hardest course, everybody thought, you're crazy, one person's going to come. But everybody came. Everybody thought, well, I got to try it. Play it once. Well, if you get everybody to play it once, you're doing okay, and that's pretty much what he pulled off.
The golf experience here, too, with Tom, who you just did a thing with, he was always on top of everything, and he seemed to know what we were looking for before we even knew it. So But in his media center, remember, Jack, when that thing was packed? I don't know how many people would we have in there at one time.
Well, back then you had the major newspapers all had a golf writer. We had Jack at the Detroit News, Jack Saylor at the Free Press, and I was a rookie bumbling in and those guys were making me earn my ropes. You know, they'd let me ask a question once in a while, but they'd look at me if I asked a dumb one. So, you know, it was. But
they took your microphone.
Well, I always said I learned how to report from watching Jack Berry, and I learned how to write a lead from looking at Jack Saylor's crazy leads. You know, and I just thought, you know, that's two people to kind of model yourselves after, and I was pretty lucky. I had two people to look up to.
Well, it's been good talking with Greg Johnson, who is Mr. Media Man in Michigan, covering for everybody and doing a great job of it. And Mr. Ken Devine, who was a couple years behind me at Catholic Central, and left a few stories in over at that time. And now, look at this. Blue sky. We wiped out the rain this morning in the blue sky, and it's another pure Michigan day.